Okay, so you'll have spent about an hour on the first half of paper 1, answering the source questions on medicine through time and making your choice and then answering the 3 parts to the question that you've chosen for the factual recall section of the paper. So as I said, you'll be about an hour in, and you then turn the page and you see some questions on crime and punishment. Now, I want to mention this now because a number of people don't realise this and end up having a go at it. You've never ever studied crime and punishment through time, so therefore ignore this part of the paper. It is there as an option. We could have taught you crime and punishment through time. We've taught you medicine through time. Do not ever attempt these questions on crime and punishment through time. Just ignore them, just skip straight through them like I'm doing now. And you will eventually come to the second half of the paper, which is on Germany. So it is set out almost identically to the medicine through time part of the paper. You will have some sources with some questions attached, and then you'll have some choice questions that are much more factual recall. So what we're going to do now is have a little look at the source questions. Okay, so we come to the first source question, which is 5A, and let's just pick out some key parts of the question. So the first thing we need to look at is the source that we're going to study. So we've got study source A here. That draws our attention to which source we're going to be focusing on. And let's just highlight some of the key words and so we can understand what the question is asking us to do. The question is saying, how would most Germans have reacted to this cartoon in 1921? Use the source and your knowledge to explain your answer. So the first key thing I'm going to highlight is the date, 1921. It is very, very specific about that date. And we have to be aware that when we're answering this question, we are going to be referring to things that have happened before 1921 or in 1921, but we can't talk about things that happened after that. So this is where your knowledge and understanding of the chronology of this topic is very, very important. And what it's actually asking us to do is how would most, so the key word there is how would most Germans have reacted. So we're looking for how they would have reacted to this cartoon. So let's go and have a look at the cartoon. Okay, so the first thing to remember when you're dealing with cartoons in particular is that they are there, they're trying to portray a message. There is a reason for them being produced, and the cartoonist has drawn them in such a way that every last detail is important. Nothing is wasted in the image. Everything is up for grabs when you're answering this question. So you need to make sure you look at it very, very carefully. So that's what we're going to do to start off with. Let's just have a look at the blurb underneath. It says a British cartoon. So it's key. We know that this is a British cartoon, not from Germany, but from Britain, that was published in 1921, which is the date for the question. And it's called A Transparent Dodge. So the title of the cartoon is also very, very important, and the example has been careful and helpful here. It says, which means an obvious trick. So a transparent dodge means an obvious trick. Germany is saying, help, help, I drown. Throw me the lifebelt. So we've got Germany here in the water, and the line coming from the man in the water that's being Germany says, help, help, I drown. Throw me the lifebelt. And the two men standing and watching here and here are Britain and France, and they reply, try standing up on your feet. So there's an awful lot of information given to you in the blurb for the source, but let's just have a little look at some finer points within the source. So we've got here, top left-hand corner, is the lifebelt that's mentioned in the blurb of the source, and we can see written on that is loan. So the option of a loan, the lifebelt in the blurb for the source is actually a loan. And Britain and France have got the option, according to this cartoon, to throw Germany that lifebelt, to throw them the loan so that they can survive. And that's what Germany's asking for. Now what Britain and France are saying back to Germany is, why don't you try and stand up? Why don't you try and stand up? And you can actually see here the cartoonist has drawn Germany on its knees, not standing up. If it stood up, it would be absolutely fine. So the message here is from Britain and France saying, well, if you stood up on your own feet and weren't complaining all the time, you'd probably be okay. You'd be able to survive. So that's really the message of the source. it is being quite negative about Germany, saying that it could actually survive and actually do quite well in 1921 if it just stood up on its own 2 feet. Right, so far all we've really established is what the message and the purpose of this source is. Now, that isn't, unfortunately, the question, otherwise we'd be able to stop there. The question is, how would most Germans react to this cartoon? So if that's the message, we're now looking to lay on top of that our knowledge and understanding of the events up to 1921 to think how Germany would react. So we need to remember what's happened in Germany since the beginning of our topic, which is 1918 to 1921. So we're only looking at 3 years. So some of the key things that will have happened: we've got the end of the First World War, we've got the abdication of the Kaiser, leaving Germany without a leader and therefore needing to create the new Weimar Constitution and the Weimar Republic being established. The Weimar Republic being fairly weak to begin with, and there being rebellions and complaints within Germany from the communists, and then the Freikorps being brought in to deal with that. So that's the situation in Germany. We've also had the Treaty of Versailles, which imposes massive, massive war debt onto Germany, and that's really what's going on in this picture. It's about Germany not being able to pay back the war debt and not being able to cope. Now, what you can't include in this answer, because that doesn't happen until 1923, is the Ruhr Crisis. This isn't about the Ruhr Crisis and France and Belgian soldiers invading that area of Germany to take their money in the form of industrial goods. It's before that's actually happened, so we just need to be very careful that we're talking about events up to 1921. So you'd need to think then, if we've established what the message of the source is, we know that Germany are in a bad way in general, how would most Germans have reacted to this cartoon? And just to summarise, they wouldn't have reacted particularly well because of those things that we've mentioned. Okay, so now we come to question 5b. So again, let's look at the question before we look at the source. So we know we are going to be studying source B. Okay, so that's where our focus lies. And if we now just read through the question and highlight our key terms. So why did the German government publish this poster in 1923? So it's a why question. And it's why did the German government in particular publish this poster in 1923. So we're looking for reasons why the German government would have produced this poster at that time in 1923. So again, we need to apply our knowledge and understanding of events up to 1923. So let's go and have a look at the source. So here we have our source, source B, and the question is there for us to look at. So remember, we're looking for reasons why the government in Germany may have published this poster in 1923. So let's just have a little look at the source itself. So what we've got at the bottom, it says, a poster published by the German government in 1923. The German miner is saying to French soldiers, "No, I will not be forced." So let's get that highlighted straight away. We've got a German miner and we've got French soldiers. So straight away we've got quite a lot of information there. Let's just get that circle around there. There's our French soldier and there is our German miner. So we already know from reading the blurb at the bottom who's involved in this picture. And if we now just think about the date that we're being asked to think about, 1923, I'm hoping for most of you, if not all of you, that should tell you straight away what this is about. So we're looking at a poster here about the Ruhr Crisis. So the Ruhr Crisis in 1923, just to recap very, very quickly, Germany could not pay that year's instalment for the war debt. So the French and Belgian troops decided to march into the Ruhr area, an industrial area in Germany. And there's a big clue here at the back in terms of the industry that goes on, because we've got these towers here which are used for bringing coal up from the mines. So in come the French and Belgian troops and they start taking things by force. Now, in reaction to that, the German workers, the German miners in that area go on strike and are actually supported by the German government in that strike, because the German government continue to pay them, and that leads on to hyperinflation, which we'll come to later, I'm sure. So when we're looking for reasons why the government published this poster in 1923, if we look at how it's being depicted, we see the face of this miner here looking strong. He's very defiant in what he's saying, and we see the French soldiers here being very aggressive towards him. So it's really a message of support. That's the purpose of this source, is a message of support to the miners to say, well done, keep going, and to encourage more to do the same. So the reason why it was published in 1923, it was a reaction to the Ruhr Crisis, and it was a way of encouraging more people, and also the miners and the workers that were on strike, to stand up against those French and Belgian soldiers. So now we come to the final source question on the Germany half of the paper, and question C is asking us to study source C. So we know that's where our focus is, it's on source C. And what it's asking us to do is to look at the source and try and work out what the message of this cartoon is. So it's what is the message of this cartoon. So let's go and have a little look at the cartoon. Okay, so here's the source and the question. So the question again, just remember we are looking for the message of this cartoon. And just to remind you that when we're working with cartoons, every last detail is important, everything is up for grabs. So once again, let's start by looking at the blurb at the bottom. It says a cartoon from a German magazine. So it's from Germany. It was published in 1923, that key date again, we talked about in the last question. And it says here, the mother is calling for bread. So we've got a few things going on here. We've got it's German, 1923, and she's calling for bread. Now, on from the Ruhr Crisis in 1923, the other key fact I'm sure you'll have in your mind is one of the consequences of the Ruhr Crisis was the printing of more money, and then hyperinflation, people just not being able to afford food, and in particular, as this source suggests, bread. So we're getting pretty close to understanding the message already. Let's just have a little look at some of the key features. So we've got here the mother figure in desperation, holding up what clearly is a starving child above falling bits of paper, which we can assume, because of the date, is the money that was printed, the worthless money that is raining down on the mother and the child, and she is almost being overcome by that worthless money, and all she's trying to do is hold her starving child above that falling money, and is just asking for some bread. She doesn't want any more money, she just needs food. So the message of this source is that Germany in 1923 is in a bad way, it is starving, it is desperate for support, and the reason for that, the knowledge that you're going to lay on top of that, is that 1923 we've got the hyperinflation, the printing of more money, leading to certain items, all items in fact, becoming very, very expensive, and in particular things like bread and eggs and basic foodstuffs. So there we have the message of the source.